Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Dean Jones, and this is Season 4, and it is a special edition author panel for the winter solstice. Today we're very happy to have on the podcast again Lisanna Wallance, the author of Natural Witches Cookbook, and Julia Halina Hadas, the author of Moon Magic Mixology and Witchcraft Cocktails, as well as J.D. Walker, author of The Witch's Guide to Wild Crafting, and Laurel Woodward, whose book Kitchen Witchery came out this year also. So I'm glad to have all these authors on our podcast today, and they'd been on before, and we're happy to have them back again. It was a wonderful conversation. I really had a great time talking to these authors about their lives and their practices and their books. So onward we go to the conversation and the author panel for the winter solstice. Here we go. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. Today, I am very happy to have a special podcast for the winter solstice, and I have many of my previous guests who've been on the podcast before. I'm going to introduce them one at a time and let them all talk. First, I have Lisanna Wallance, the author of the Natural Witches Cookbook, who grew up in New York, attending Bernard College of Columbia University before moving to Paris. She was born with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a connective tissue disorder that causes dysfunction throughout the body. When her symptoms suddenly worsened, she developed deeper into her passion for cooking as a way to help heal herself. She spent years experimenting with her diet using food, plant, and mushroom medicine as a way to regain control of her life. She lives in Paris with her longtime boyfriend and splits the rest of her time between Normandy, New York, and Martha's Vineyard. Next up is Julia Halina Hadas, the author of Witchcraft Cocktails, is a practicing witch and an avid craft cocktail fanatic and bartender. Having worked at a distillery and as a craft cocktail bartender at the San Francisco Bay Area, she combined her love of the craft cocktail movement with her witchcraft practice. She holds a BA in anthropology and is a certified crystal healer, shamanic, and Reiki practitioner. And then next up I have J.D. Walker from Greensboro, North Carolina, is the Vice Chancellor of the House of Acacia, a North Carolina pagan group. A former business journalist, she writes a weekly garden column for the Courier Tribune and has contributed dozens of articles to Wellens almanacs. And then next up is Laurel Woodward, a writer, gardener, and cook living a magical life in the Pacific Northwest. She has written for magazines and e-zines on the subject of healthy living, organic gardening, sustainable living, and the magic of tapping into creative energy. Kitchen Witchery is her first book, and her second will be published next year. Congratulations, everyone, for being on the show. Thank you for being here, and happy early solstice to all of you.
Thank you.
Happy solstice to you as well.
Thank you so much.
So I just want to ask each of you, how are you doing and what projects are you working on?
Who wants to jump in first? I'll jump in first. I'm finishing up the bibliography for my book on tree magic. It's a follow-up to the Witch's Guide to Wildcraft, which came out with Llewellyn this year. I'm trying to get those notes finished so that I get that to Llewellyn. Hopefully it will be published next year. Beyond that, I just do sporadic writing on various topics for various publications.
Excellent.
Well, I have a book coming out in July. It's a backyard garden witchery, and it's about creating sacred space outside in your own backyard.
That sounds lovely. This is Lisanna. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm working on my second cookbook, which is a more plant-based, still healing focused, but more plant-based cookbook, and still promoting my last one, and planning workshops for next year as well.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's so awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Julia. Both of those books sound great. I can't wait to see those come out. For myself, my book just came out last month, my second one, Moon Magic Mixology. And I moved to Arizona this year. So like right now I'm in this winter solstice phase of just trying to get my life, back in order in kind of that cocoon phase. But I am hoping to bring out some new projects in the new year. So now I'm just getting back in sync with everything, kind of resting, and excited to get back into it with the new year.
I love that you said resting also and recharging. I think that's something that we're all needing to focus on with this new year, winter, and also we're heading into winter, but it's also the light season as well. So I'm hoping for some good new energy and regeneration. I actually just got back to France after being a year and a half away in America. So this has been, I was in America, basically hiding out in the forest with mushrooms. And now I'm in a city with people again during a peculiar time. So it's been, I love that you said recharging, and also congratulations on your second book. That sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
you.
Being
To everyone.
yeah, being in a forest with mushrooms sounds wonderful, but I'm glad you're back at your home. So
yeah, I feel like it's healthy. Mushroom time later.
Now, I want to ask you all, for those of you that want to answer this question, and it's optional, describe your spiritual practice and tell us about your path that you work with.
Everybody's being very bashful. Let me just jump on in here.
That's okay.
My personal spiritual path obviously is linked very close to nature. I've been a gardener all of my life. My family gardened. We relied on that to put food on the table to a large extent. So I have a very strong connection, feel like I have a very strong connection to nature. They used to throw around terms like hedge witch or root worker. So I guess I would fall in that category with a healthy influence from European Greco-Roman traditions. I don't think many of us escape the revival that occurred starting with Gardner with the Wicca traditions. That we've just grown beyond that and found closer ties to some of the other traditions. HOA, for instance, is a Celtic organization. So a lot of what we do relies on Celtic mythology and Celtic traditions.
Wow, that was beautifully said. And also I it's so true. We are so bound inside of that. I mean, Western religion is bound inside nature religions, if you start to break it down as well. I love the legacy of gardening that you spoke of. For me, it's nature as well as my religion, my spirituality, the forest. I had a doctor one time ask me, a naturopathic doctor asked me, do I feel better in the forest or by the ocean? And he was using that as a diagnosis, but I love that question. I think about it a lot, and like these different forms of churches that we have, but also for me, the cosmos are really where I find comfort, because for me, the cosmos is the kind of this representation of afterlife within it. On Earth, we're experiencing it, we'll decompose, we'll turn into the mushrooms and so forth, but eventually it's going back to stars and stardust. So I don't know, I personally look up at the stars and it gives me a lot of comfort. And I think that's why people seek out spirituality for comfort.
Do you do forest bathing? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm always escaping into the forest wherever I can go. I do a lot of foraging as well. So I'd love to hear about other people's foraging and wildcrafting too. But that's an amazing way I find for me to connect with plants. And, I'll hug a tree or two and talk to some mushrooms and avoid humans and all that.
I do the same thing. I'm also a tree hugger. And anytime I'm feeling the need, which is at least once a week, I go for forest walks. Being up here in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm in the middle of the green, so it's really easy to just walk down the street, and I'm in the middle of I have a river and a pine forest.
That's a beautiful area. Nice. It's been 15, 20 years since I've been in the Northwest, but it was overwhelming to go through this entire area, and it was just green. It was just green. And I had come at that time from fall in North Carolina, where everything was yellow, red, orange, everything under the sun. And seeing that area was beautiful with just the dense and many textures of greenery.
Yes.
I love hearing about your guys' forest gathering and all of that, because I just moved from the Bay, like I said, and it was so lush and green there, especially around this time. And I've moved now to Arizona, where just, desert, red rocks, and it has a different, energy, creativity and things like that. And there's certainly parts where greener that I'll be visiting, but it's just such a shift. And I'm just starting to get my garden back going because I used to have, rosemary and lavender that I could just go out and grab fresh, lemon from the tree. So I'm definitely someone that loves to do, a little bit of that garden kitchen witchery. And I love aligning, my spiritual practice to astrology as well. That's a big thing for me. So it's kind of fun to change it all to a little bit of like a different location and tune into the energy of the land and how it's different. But yeah, I love hearing about your guys' forest walks. I'm a little envious. I definitely miss that.
But Julia, I spent 18 years in Arizona, and you're right. The desert has a magic all of its own. I mean, yeah, of course you have to deal with that searing heat in the summer, but the winter right now is just glorious. And you have the big sky and the clear big sky with all the stars where you can see everything.
Yes. That's my favorite thing. I haven't seen as many shooting stars as since I've moved here. And also the monsoon season. I love that. I live for that kind of, flash rain and lightning. It's very exciting.
It's a wild, chaotic energy that, it is very different from up here, but nice.
And you can turn your apartment into a jungle too. I mean, even if you can have the desert outside, and actually that's perfect for rosemary and lavender. So you might be even more acclimated. But like I have basically a jungle going on here. If I tip it up, oh, you see plants everywhere.
Oh wow!
And I love it. I'm in a city, right? And actually, these are all clones. I found a dying plant on the street and just started cloning it. So you can make a forest inside any apartment, even in a city, and it really works.
That's the plan.
Pothos and peace lily behind you. Pothos over here, peace lily behind you.
Exactly. Good cleaning plants.
So I want to ask another question for everybody, and this is optional. You can answer this if you want or not, like all the questions are, obviously. Tell us about the time when you discovered, what was the time for you that was the kind of a crossroads or an epiphany in your life where you decided, I'm a witch, where you said that to yourself and you basically claimed that title?
Well, I'll just jump in because I know my answer to this. It happened in 2 stages for me. It happened in my childhood stage where I think it really started with my sister who was going through like a witch Wicca phase, but I latched onto it when I was young. And then I timed perfectly with the Harry Potter generation. And that just like this world of magic started, and everything that I'd loved before kind of was crystallized. And I just wanted to be a witch so badly that I would truly mourn thinking that I didn't have magical powers. And then that disappeared when I went to college and so forth. And then when my health issues popped back up, and I wasn't reacting well to medications and all these things, I realized that food and plants and healing and this kind of witchy empowerment was something that I had to turn back to. And it also made it fun and magical. And then I discovered that witchcraft, so to speak, wasn't at all what I thought when I was little. When I was little, I thought it wasn't real, and I was sad it wasn't. And then I discovered that it actually is, and that it manifests in all different ways.
I love that. Very nice.
Well, I love the mention of Harry Potter. This is Julia, by the way. And the reason why I love that is because for myself too, like, when I was young, I was always searching for the magical, for witchcraft. But growing up in an immigrant Catholic, Polish Catholic family, I didn't even know that alternative modalities of, spirituality existed beyond, the big 3. And so it wasn't until I actually watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the beginning of, high school, and everything there, I was so into reading fantasy and science fiction novels that I knew every concept they talked about on there was based in like mythological ideas. And so when Willow became Wiccan, I was like, I have never heard of this, everything else I'm familiar with. So I started Googling it and I was like, oh my God, while I didn't end up being Wiccan, I identify as a witch. That was like my gateway. So I think pop culture plays a really cool part in, letting people learn about other things that are out there that we otherwise might not be familiar with. So I'm glad to know that other people have come in through that way.
For me, it was I started forming allies with plants in my garden and looking up their histories and lore. was just a fascinating gateway that unfolded a very slow practice that now is part of my everyday life. So yeah, it wasn't media, but it was garden plants for me.
It was growing up. I had a rich background in fairy tales. Well, this is pre-Harry Potter. This is pre Buffy the Vampire, and a lot of the things that are so popular with folks now, pre-Charmed, the original Charmed. But I always had lots of access to fairy tales and mythology. I think I read Edith Hamilton's book on Greek mythology by the 6th grade, and from that point on was reading it regularly, rereading it regularly, and thinking that this just makes so much sense. And although I never declared myself a witch, I've always considered myself pagan. I also had a lot of exposure to a lot of different religions. My grandmother was adamant on making sure that we were exposed to a lot of different, these are the Christian Judeo religions. So I saw those things and compared it to what I was reading in my mythologies and some of the other books that I came across, and saying, this is just another tradition, just like some of the Christian traditions, and this tradition makes more sense to me. The magic part, again, coming of age in the 60s and 70s, that was the next renaissance of witchcraft and paganism in America, where you have all kinds of interest in it. You have Buckland coming and starting his tradition, and several other folks starting new traditions of their own. So I was aware of those and reading bits and pieces about that. But even at that point, it was still a situation where you were fairly isolated, or at least I felt like I was fairly isolated, because there was still the insistence that to be a witch, you had to be in a coven, you had to be in a group. A solitary practitioner was practically unheard of until Scott Cunningham comes along and says, who initiated the first witch? Somebody has to start somewhere. So, of course, at that point, you begin to realize it's perfectly okay for me to call myself a witch, even though I've never been in a coven. And I think my tradition then has just built from that point on.
Yeah, it's funny how important I think Scott Cunningham was for so many of us. And I think reading a lot of the early books, I mean, Llewellyn published some of the first books I think many of us saw. And I think outside of that, I saw the first book I think was Sybil Leek's Diary of a Witch. And I'm dating myself with that one. And Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler, was huge. Does anybody have like a remembrance of a first book they got which kind of blew their mind? It kind of opened up things for them?
I have a copy of Sybil Leek's book on candle magic.
Oh, wow.
It's not, I wish it was a first edition. It's not. And for the life of me, I can't remember how I came by it. I know I got it when I was in my teens. And again, that was the first practical book that I had ever seen. Like I said, there's plenty of fairy tales in my life, plenty of mythology, but opening that book and seeing someone say to you, okay, this is what this does. And if you want to do that, here's how you can go about doing it with candle magic. And here are some of the good things and the bad things that you run into. And to me, it was a treasure. I still have it in my collection.
My first one, I think, was Lori Cabot book that I still have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then I found Starhawk and just, I reread her books. And every time I pick one up, I just started Earth Path again the other day. And every time I pick one up, I find new things in it that liven my practice.
You guys are inspiring me so much because I have all these old school Wicca books that I collected when I was 8. Literally, actually, again, still from my sister's shelf, who's now a corporate lawyer and all these things. But I understood absolutely nothing when I would open it up when I was little. So I kind of want to go back in there and investigate. But I mean, a book that I know maybe I'm changing the subject a little too fast, but a book that's inspiring me right now that just keeps coming to mind, and with all of our connections to plant energy and plant healing, is Plant Intelligence in the Imaginary Realm. Does anyone know
Oh,
that book?
No.
Yeah, actually, I
It
think I've seen it.
It is fascinating combining the science and the spiritual inside plants and our connections to them. And it goes into identity and gender and everything. And I highly recommend for anyone in balancing the two sides of their practice.
Nice.
I'm an animist, so I love
Mhm.
all the new things that are coming out about plants. I just read the tree book by the German author.
Peterson?
Oh, yes, Peter
Mhm.
Peter Wollmack or something. The Secret Life of Trees. That was it.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
yes.
exactly it. Mhm.
And
Yes,
it's fascinating. It is just fascinating.
that is an
Mm.
amazing book, and the information he brought out about how plants communicate. I remember reading somewhere, and I can't for the life of me remember which book it was in. Someone said, and this was before Peterson's book came out, saying that people think that plants or trees don't move, and his response was, well, maybe they do, but they do it so slowly that you don't know. People
Exactly.
think plants don't talk to one another, but they do. We know now that they have this fungal network that they literally communicate with each other, and they make sacrifices for each other, and they
Mhm.
send out alerts for each
Mm.
other.
Yes.
It's amazing. I don't know that we should require that science justify what we believe, but it is nice to know that, by golly, we were right.
Yeah.
We said that trees talk to one another. There was an animism to
Mhm.
nature, and we begin to understand that now when science pushes those boundaries.
Exactly. And the scientists are now studying on a molecular level things that the Aztecs and the Mayans
Mhm.
were
Wow.
doing and predicting in their own patterns. And it's this question of knowledge being passed down. And it was actually so interesting that you said about trees not moving. I
Uh-huh.
love that. Also, just because the thing that keeps actually right now I'm also doing, this is Lisanna, by the way. I was supposed to probably say that earlier.
Yeah, you're
No,
supposed
it's
to
fine.
say that, and I just keep jabbering on.
I know. I'm doing a clinical herbalism course to really dive deeper into plant medicine. And something that really comes out as like, why do plants have all these medicinal properties, all these sort of ways to fight off things and to adapt to situations? And we get adaptogens or releasing chemical mediators like serotonin to fight off other species and so forth. And what it really comes down to is their inability to move.
Mhm.
Because they're fixated to the ground,
Exactly.
they have to create these incredible defense systems. And then you start to question what movement really is. So we can't see them because our safety depends on movement. But for them, they're moving through the mycelial networks under the ground, and there's an entire neural dance taking place. And I'm so excited as like all the books and wonderfuls, but it's really great also that a lot of this stuff is starting to come onto streaming, and that documentaries like Fantastic Fungi and Kiss the Ground and all those types of things are coming out, so that people are really tuning into this. Like 5 years ago, if you talked about underground mushroom brains, no one would have any idea. But now
Yeah.
it's kind of common knowledge almost. So it's
I
great.
was reading about this one study where a bush was being eaten on one side of a field,
Mhm.
and it was able to transmit chemicals as a warning so that bushes on the other side could produce a chemical that would make the animal not eat it. I think it was a
Exactly.
bitter chemical. And I think that's
Exactly.
just fascinating.
It's
That is
amazing.
amazing.
There's things all over like that. I think it's something with chrysanthemums. Don't quote me on this, but they can, if they're being attacked by a certain pest, they will attract using pheromones the type of wasp that will attack that
Yeah.
pest. So
Yeah.
it's like several degrees removed. They have, and they protect their own, like trees. They'll protect their babies first and foremost. It's I mean, we could talk forever about trees.
Or nourish a sick friend on the other side of a field. In that Secret Life of Trees, he noticed that a stump was still alive after being cut down for years, and it was because the trees around it were feeding its roots and keeping it from dying.
Well, we could
The
definitely
book-
learn something from that, I think.
The book that we're referencing there, because I happened to reference it in my book for Llewellyn, was Peter Wohledben, BEN, but put my glasses back on, can't see. The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World.
Thank you for that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. There's so many good books I'm gonna have to read
I
after
know.
this podcast.
You end up holed up in your house. You never go out because you're trying to read all these books.
Which is good for this season. I have
Oh,
I
yes.
have a lot of higgy days up here where it's cold and sleeting out, and I make a fire and a hot cup of tea and sit by the fire and just read something good.
On that note, I want to ask everybody about what they're doing to celebrate the holidays, to celebrate the solstice, however you want to term it. What practices do you have for the solstice, and what traditions do you do, or crafts, or whatever have you?
Well, this is Laurel, and we're going to have a quiet year this year. We're going to build a fire in the fireplace and write down some things we want to get rid of or shed for the year to come, and sip eggnog with rum while we burn what we want to get rid of.
I love that.
I'll be having a gathering with several friends and members of HOA tomorrow evening. Fortunately, this is North Carolina winter weather, and we're in a heat wave right now. It's a balmy 70 degrees outside, and
Oh,
it's supposed to be like that tomorrow. So we will be gathering outside tomorrow, which is fortunate. We haven't been able to gather a whole lot whenever it requires being indoors because of the COVID situation, but we will gather and cast a circle and do a healing energy for one of our members who is in need of that, and a family member they have that is on the verge of passing. And then we will have a communal dinner and exchange presents.
that sounds lovely.
That sounds absolutely magical. For myself, it's probably going to be, quiet this year too, since I'm just, situating myself in a new location, family and whatnot. But I do hope to, celebrate with, a little bonfire, maybe wake up, with the sunrise. And I like to do a lot of reflection on these days, being the shortest daylight hours of the year, the longest night. And with the new year coming up, I like to use the time to kind of think of what would I like to grow with the growth of the sun, in the new year until the summer solstice. What kind of things do I want to cleanse from my life, and setting intentions in that way. And then of course, I am very cocktail focused. I do want to try making a Yule log, like a actual, not a wooden Yule log, but a chocolate Yule log.
Oh my
But that would be
Nice.
fun. But definitely cocktails. So Yule mules. I'm Polish, Slavic, so some poppy seed milk is always a go-to. Some bourbon drinks. So I'm definitely going to have lots of concoctions prepared.
Nice.
Mm.
I love
Julia,
that.
that sounds so wonderful. Everybody, those all sound like such beautiful and ways to celebrate. I think I might celebrate in two parts. On the solstice itself, I'll still be in Paris, and I might do a cleansing bath. And I like this idea you're inspiring me of shedding and thinking about what we want to let go and what we want to do for the year to come, and also less pressure. I always feel like I always fall asleep through full moons or special days just from all the fatigue, and I think it's also okay to just celebrate it a little messily this year. And for the time around the holidays, I'm going to be going to the countryside, to Normandy, close to the sea, and probably gather bay leaves and make little garlands and branches, and just try to spend as much time outdoors. And now I really want to make a fire too, so I want to put that on the menu as well.
Sounds
And
lovely.
I've promised my my boyfriend's family we're celebrating with, and him, that I would redo Thanksgiving, because I was in America for that, and it's just mind-blowing all the food that happens. So I think I'm going to be cooking a big forest feast with lots of mushrooms, and we'll see, all kinds of delicious things.
That's lovely. So I want to ask everybody, well, I know many of you have already touched on this, but if anybody wants to do any additional answers, what seasonal stuff do you cook this time of year? for the solstice or any other parts of the holiday season? What kind of things do you make this time of year?
This is Laurel, and for holiday cooking, I cook from pretty much Halloween to past New Year's. I'm just in holiday cooking mode. And yesterday I made 5 almond cakes and gave one to all my neighbors and kept one. And I have family that comes over for most of the high holidays. And we celebrate with big meals. And that's just always been a part of celebration, is food and spending a lot of time in the kitchen making something special.
Sounds lovely.
We usually do pretty traditional stuff. Again, in Celtic traditions, pork is a key food item, a sacred meat, so to speak, as well as salmon. So we usually do one or the other of those and focus heavily on root vegetables for the accompanying part of the meal. And then it's just everybody's fair game when it comes to the desserts. I mean, technically we should be doing like a Scottish, I think it's called a bannock. It's a heavy oat bread that's frequently seasoned with spices. But we take all comers. Just bring us something sweet. We don't care.
I love this. I'm probably not going to do this year, but because my family is Polish, we have a lot of Polish Catholic traditions. So just to add to the food beyond the cocktails that I'm excited to make this year, usually on Christmas Eve is when a lot of Polish Catholic people will do a bigger celebration. And so no meat, just fish. They'll tend to do just tons of fish dishes. So if you're someone like me who doesn't like a lot of fish, it's kind of torture.
Oh my goodness.
You've got pickled red herring, just all the fish, like Jello filled with fish, just all of the different fish dishes. And then they do barszcz, so a beet soup.
I love it.
Pierogi. Yeah, so pierogi is a big one. That would be it takes hours to make those, but it might be fun to do. And gołąbki, so cabbage rolls filled with meat and tomato. Well, that would be on Christmas Day, but that's one of my more favorite Polish dishes since I'm not a big fish person. So those are some of the more, Polish traditions that, I'd usually partake in some way. But this year, thankfully, I am free of the fish meal.
But it sounds amazing, all the other ones. I love that because I have Russian in me with my book also coming out in Russian, but I don't know many of the recipes except for, I like the pickled herring and the borscht and so forth, but it's so great to hear those details. This is Lisanna, by the way. For me, I just love cooking seasonally, and that's how I celebrate all the solstices or the equinoxes. It's looking for the freshest, juiciest fruit of vegetables of the season, like persimmons and pomegranates and just really magical lush fruits like that. And actually in France, my recipes always have a very French touch to them too, just because I grew up with my grandmother's Dutch cooking and there's a big connection there too, and obviously living here. But the French actually do turkey for Christmas dinner, which I think is kind of funny for Americans. But a lot of earthy cooking. I love the root vegetables.
Out of curiosity, do they have the American persimmon, or are you using the Japanese persimmon in France?
I can tell you. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go pull it up.
All right. That's cool.
Okay. Sorry, I sent you on an errand.
Okay.
I'd be very curious to know if they actually. That is a Japanese
really?
persimmon. Those things are so weird because they do ripen about this time of the year in this temperate zone. And you go by and you see these trees in the middle of winter. They look like big tomatoes hanging on them.
Yeah.
They grow up here. We have them. My neighbor just gave me a whole basket. And they are delicious. That kind you can eat when it's hard still, like an apple.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for it to get ripe. They are delicious.
As I understand it, on the West Coast, there are quite a few areas that have developed the persimmon, the Japanese persimmon grows, because you do have the Asian American population concentration there, and they're very keen on enjoying the persimmons, dried, fresh, cooked, however you make them.
I was going to say, Lisanna, your cookbook is one of the few cookbooks I've seen that uses the persimmon well and really highlights it as a fruit and makes it attractive. I recommend anybody who likes persimmons or is interested in cooking with them to check out Lisanna's cookbook. It's really great. It has really great usages of a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Thank you.
Now, I want to ask everybody what some of their favorite memories are about the holidays or the solstice specifically too, although it could be any of them. Any fond recollections or things?
Well, I think I would have to say, I mean, not to start off this conversation on a more negative note, but I feel like a lot of people who are drawn to witchcraft or paganism, a lot of times, at least for myself, it was a source of empowerment. And so I won't say that the holidays have always been my favorite time of year, because I go a little bit against the grain in my family. But definitely a big thing for me is my traditional foods. I'm working on confirming my Polish citizenship. So I love connecting to my heritage. And through that, that's like the big thing for me. I feel like a really deep connection to my ancestors and my ancestral land. So that's a big thing for me. But honestly, my favorite thing to do on the winter solstice is just to chill, that rest and relaxation, and really just like think about setting intentions, the fire or lighting a candle, on the winter solstice, to go through the night with my intentions for the growth, to grow with the growth of the sunlight hours. So that's kind of my favorite thing to do, is just relax.
Julia, I love that you said that, because I spend most of the mornings this time of year watching the sunrise, just because it rises so late, it's easy to do. And there is such a connection with the time of year, with the energy, and with the whole shift of the seasonal flow.
We had a circle one time for a winter solstice gathering, and it was one of those times when our North Carolina weather decided it was going to snow on winter solstice, or at least for the day that we were gathered for it. And it wasn't very heavy; it was more sleet than snow, but it was, again, outside around the bell fire. As we had done the ritual, we had gotten to one point. Everyone had been asked to write down something that they were fearful of or wanted to get out of their life. And then with just the light of the bell fire, with no other lights around, everyone was, of course, in cloak. Everyone was asked to share that thing that they wanted to release. And because it was dark and we were with people that we were comfortable with, it was very liberating to say that thing that just terrified you, or that just made you feel so sad that you wished was out of your life. To say it out loud in a safe gathering like that. And then after everyone had gone through to do that, everyone burned that particular paper that they had written this hurtful thing or this sad thing down on. Just throw it into the fire and burn it. And at least for that time period, you felt like there's a possibility for release. We can let this go. We can heal from this. We can move on from this, whatever it was.
Sounds powerful.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you for that. It's you're inspiring me. Just talking with you guys is getting me to want to do all kinds of little special rituals. And I think fire and heat, but mostly fire is a powerful one this time of year. All the contrasts of the fire and the sun returning and the colds and warmth to combat the dark nights, but also fire as regeneration and phoenix and ashes and all those kinds of symbolism. I think rituals like that, the first time I did them, I did it kind of more for play. And then it suddenly hit me that, wow, even if the ritual itself, obviously for me, doesn't change something in that way, just the gesture, the act, and going through it and committing to it is enough to change your attitude. And I mean, it can go deeper than that. I remember when I was doing liver cleanses with castor oil packs after I had some kidney issues. I remember my healer told me to visualize other things in my life that I was holding on to, visualize that being cleansed as well. And that's when you can connect body and mind, and in a really powerful way. So in that sense, just rituals, it's not just gestures, it's truly altering our mental state and our attitude about something, and that can alter our physical. It's manipulating our brain chemicals. It's magic. It's self-empowerment.
It is. And it also helps that the energy of the castor is purgative. That's what castor does. Castor oil, castor bean, it can be toxic certainly, but when you use it in the packs like that, or when you just use it in purgative type ritual or spell work, it's lending that energy of getting rid of this negativity, whatever the negativity, if it's a health issue or a life issue.
I think the elemental energy too, like the fire or the cleansing bath, we take a ritual bath, really works on our psychology, and it is just another trigger to help get us in that state of mind.
What plants do you guys use at this time of year that you find that you gravitate towards the most?
Well, we certainly rely on a lot of the traditional ones. I have a number of different hollies, native hollies and landscape hollies around. I have yew, Y-E-W.
Right.
I love my yew plants. Rosemary, and how can you not use rosemary this time of year? Any of the pines. But I also like to use the oak bark because I love the smell of oak wood.
Yes.
It reminds us that masculine energy and the sun energy, just the male manifest in nature is coming back, and it just smells so good to mix it in with incenses.
I'm still using a lot of mugwort and hawthorn. I use and lemon balm. Lemon balm's just really nice.
Yes.
But this time of year, I use cinnamon sticks every morning for just about everything. The scent of cinnamon is just it invokes holiday memories and just makes everyone cheerful and joyful, and I think cinnamon for me is a real holiday scent.
It's also an immune boost. Oh, sorry, you go, please, Julia.
Oh, no, you can go ahead. It's all good.
I was going to say that that cinnamon's also, it's an anti-inflammatory, immunostimulator, just a core of Ayurveda in a way that helps us transition. I think if we pay attention to what our bodies need, we see that the things that we gravitate towards at this time of year and the things that are in season in our areas, they're really synced up, like the citrus fruits that start to come when we need more vitamin C, the mushrooms before the winter time, and all the fatty nuts and so forth. But sorry, please, someone else can take off here. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I love all of, the herbs and spices you guys mentioned. I think my favorite thing about this time of the year is actually, the different herbs and spices, because especially, in the cooking world or the cocktail world, you can use them in drinks, but also use them easily in magic. So rosemary, obviously a big one. Bay leaf, so putting bay leaf in my cocktails or my eggnog, and then doing a bay leaf wishing spell along with drinking that libation. The cinnamon, using a cinnamon stick to stir my winter cocktails, and then using that in manifestation and prosperity magic, clove, nutmeg. And then more on the the cocktail side of things, juniper through the form of gin.
Nice.
So gin is one of my favorite things to work with, as well as bourbon, because bourbon comes from a background in grain, right? And that's how people would get through the winter months in a lot of places. And so to me, bourbon is a great way to connect to that ancestral grounding, winter prosperity energy. And then juniper, for the cleansing with bay leaf and rosemary, and it's just match it with some spell work and it's perfect.
You're making me want to use that for tinctures now. when I think the juniper gin, like why, because this time of year is also a big one for bottling up. I'm like a squirrel preparing for winter. I just make giant vats of tinctures of elderberries and reishi for everybody around me. But you're making me want to make gin tinctures now when you're talking about the
definitely
medicine inside there.
Julia, I'm curious. I know that bay, because I love to use it in beans and soups and stew. I use bay in a lot of stuff, but it never occurred to me to use it in a cocktail. Is it giving it that kind of umami taste to your cocktail? What does it lend to the cocktail?
I guess I would say in my experience from umami from working in the restaurant industry, I would say it does not give that flavor. It gives more of like that pine kind of crisp herbal aroma along the lines of kind of like a gin juniper. So it matches really well with gin concoctions. But even, boiling it like, an eggnog, or mulled wine, it just brings this really, it can bring, more earthy pine aromas to concoction. It's really uplifting and energy. I'm very kinesthetic, so when I describe how things taste, it's like how it makes my energy feel. So it's very, like an uplifting, but that the forest floor after a mist kind of aroma.
So you're brewing the tea and adding that to the cocktail, or are you actually macerating the leaf in the vodka or gin or whatever you're doing?
So it's actually both. So if I'm doing a shaken concoction, so for example, in my more recent book, Moon Magic Mixology, there's the Golden Moon cocktail, which is great for this time of year. You put egg whites, it has allspice in it, as well as bay leaf. And so whenever you're doing an herb in a cocktail, you're going to, if you have a syrup, add that, any bitters, and then all of the fresh ingredients, and you will muddle it. So pushing down and turning to get the oils to express into the syrup. So you don't do that in the alcohol because it doesn't get it to express as well.
Okay.
And then you add the alcohol and the citric acid, and then you shake it. And then versus, if I'm doing a hot drink, like, an eggnog, or a mulled wine, you do boil it with the bay leaf in there. So it just depends, but you can try. In my first book, I have a bay leaf orange syrup. And so that is making a tea with dried bay leaf. And then you add that. So there's just a million different ways you can do it. I'm like, all over the place. So I can think of a million ways. Or there's bay leaf bitters. So if we're talking about tinctures, putting some bitters. So yeah, you can do it all of those ways to get that flavor in a million different creative ways into your drink.
I love that. And I love how you've made that a potion.
Absolutely. It's I love that. It's just funny because I have to say, there's certain reasons for it. We need to be inclusive, and there's reasons to be concerned about different substances, but people tend to think of cocktails and alcohol as being removed from spirituality and witchcraft. But the reality is that everything in the modern craft cocktail industry has its roots in ancient witchcraft and pagan practices. I mean, that's the reason why alcohol exists. It was spiritual, and even modern day bitters and shrubs that they put into cocktails, all of those come from, healing tinctures that they would do, or things to preserve the energy of herbs. So it is totally a potion. And then when you get the bartending tools, you make it really physical, and you put in your intention. And what's more magical than imbibing it? And then you can combine the magic, with things around you, like doing the same spices in a candle dressing or bath or whatever. Anyway, I could talk about it forever.
I love this. Sorry, please.
I was just going to ask, Julia, have you read Amy Stewart's book, The Drunken Botanist?
Oh my God, yeah. She's
is that not wonderful? Oh my God, that is a tremendous book.
And I really like it because, one of the things that was just kind of funny, actually, in my more recent book, Moon Magic Mixology, trying to find the history of different spices and herbs, it's varied. There's lots of different records. And so Amy Stewart's book was a big one that I referenced. And in some occasions I got into a little argument with my copy editor.
I had the same. In fact, over half of the lore and histories that I dug up got axed because I couldn't find a good citation for them.
Yeah,
That's been
it's
my
just
problem with finishing the universe, the Grove of the Universe tree book that I'm finishing here, is finding, as you say, trying to find the sources in the first place, finding reputable sources,
Right.
finding
Yeah.
the ones that go back to the original source, as opposed to
yeah,
somebody copied from somebody, from somebody, from somebody, from somebody.
yeah,
And it's been maddening trying to get
Yeah.
that all taken care of.
Yes.
yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, The Drunken Botanist by Amy Stewart, just to talk about it, it goes into all of the different herbs and ingredients that go into making, different types of alcohol. And it talks about the history of that ingredient and the lore. And she also has like gardening suggestions in there. It's just really fabulous to like learn the diverse history and really go into detail and even how it's used in modern, cocktail making. So yeah.
We're sorry, we cut
Another
you
book
off,
from my
Lisanna. Lisanna, you were starting to say something. We got off on a
Oh,
tangent.
I mean,
there.
I don't even remember what I was going to say. Something of just how much that's imbuing what we drink every day in our recipes with healing medicine is just, I love that. And I love that you're describing that, because that's the point of all my recipes. It's
Yeah.
that we can figure out how to manipulate ingredients and combine ingredients to alter our physical state. We do it in little ways, like, oh, we're sick, we should eat more vitamin C or more this. But if you really
Yeah.
start to go deeper inside of it and understand not only the mechanisms of nutrition, but of plants and what that can do, like, if people had any idea of the medicinal value of plants that you could order on the internet and the kind of ways they can alter you. And when you mentioned going back to the origins of things, that's just, there's been so many ways that plant medicine, healing, and mushroom medicine has been perverted, if I must say. Like, one thing that gets to me so much is poppy seeds and milk of the poppy. And I'm someone who has a lot of chronic pain, and I react terribly to drugs and painkillers. And it all has to do with the fillers that are inside of that. Like, the pure plant has been so removed from its healing source, and alcohol is the same. And it happens a lot. I mean, if we look at modern medicine today, it all has roots back. I mean, aspirin, willow bark, Valium, valerian, everything goes back. So good for all of us for trying to resurrect those connections.
I'm having so much fun listening to all of you guys talk, I have to say. Just the collective consciousness of all of you talking together about all the stuff is just really wonderful. And I know that our listeners are going to love this too. So this is so awesome. Thank you all. I want to ask all of you, what's next for each of you?
All right, this is Laurel. I'll go first. I have a book coming out in July, and it's about sacred space and about connecting with nature outdoors. But it also has bits about creating your own garden and a compendium of flowers and their magical energy and how you can use them in your practice.
The project that I'm working on now, hopefully to finish up this week and send it off to Llewellyn, is in the Grove of the Universe tree, where I look at the magic of trees, how people relate to them. I have a short section in there to give folks a taste of 20 common trees that you can find just about anywhere in the continental US and quite a lot of other areas in the Northern Hemisphere. And we go from that to talking about tree spirits, tree entities. And then I go from that to broader concepts of the tree of life, tree of knowledge, and the universe tree, what I call the universe tree. A lot of folks are accustomed to saying the world tree, and how you can utilize those images to meditate on and try to bring that connectivity into your life by relating to trees and these various concepts.
Sounds fascinating.
Thank you.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, me too.
Sounds great. I'm like, ooh. Anyway, I'm gonna go, online and add all these books to my wish list to keep an eye out for when they're all available. So for myself personally, I think, now that I'm finally, after you need a few months when you get moved to get situated. So I really want to make sure now that I'm a little more grounded take advantage of this desert creative force energy and, push myself out there. I have so many different creative projects that I want to send over to my publisher and see what they can and can't do, teach some classes and just kind of get back out there after, taking a little bit of a break with the winter solstice.
Mhm. This all sounds so lovely what everyone's doing. For me, I mean, getting back to Paris after such a long time has been the big adventure and next thing for me. So right now I'm really enjoying just being here and reconnecting with a place that I hadn't been in so long because of the pandemic, and then just like really trying to finalize my next book. I've finished almost all the photos because I do all the photos myself, which is I write my cookbooks backwards. I gotta start. I do everything all alone. So it's a really one human show over here. So then hopefully wrapping this up so it can start to advance and trying to pick up some of the other things that got thrown to the side from the pandemic and just staying healthy and happy and not putting too much pressure on myself. I feel like we put also a lot of pressure on ourselves to evolve and change. And Julia, I love that you kept mentioning the word rest, because I think that's also really important. This idea
Absolutely.
of rest more to do more.
Yes.
All right, everybody, I thank you for being here today. This has been just wonderful. I really want to do this again. I'll invite you all to do this again on another date. I'll throw out the summer solstice. We could try it again next year and see if you guys want to do that.
Yes,
I'd love to work with that energy. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I love it. And we can check back in and see
That'd be great.
how our
See
solstice
where we are.
rituals turned out.
Sounds
like that.
fantastic.
Well, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
That was a wonderful podcast to record, and I really enjoyed getting to talk to all the authors about the solstice and their practices. I really look forward to having them on the podcast again. It's always wonderful to talk to them. So it was a treat to hear them talk to each other as well. Just really great. Coming up on Christmas Eve, on the 24th, we have a panel to celebrate the One Table, One World authors that we've had on the podcast before. We're having them return to talk about Christmas and the holidays. We're going to have Terry Barr back. He was our first guest on the podcast, and I'm really happy to have him on again. Melissa Matthews as well, we've had on the podcast before. She's coming back to talk about her work and her year and her celebrating the holidays, and as well Catherine Dillon, who's been on the podcast before, one of our early guests. She'll be back to talk about writing, and we'll all talk about One Table, One World and writing on Medium, as well as how we celebrate the holidays. So in that spirit, I hope you all have great holidays, and I look forward to having you listen to that podcast as well. And then we're going to be having wonderful season come up next, and we'll be announcing that stuff in a special episode next week as well. So until then, happy holidays and happy cooking.